Good morning, everybody, and this is Jason Butt with the UGAsports.com quick take. Doing something a little bit different today. We're going to talk basketball, which just ended yesterday with a 72-67 loss to LSU. I mean, it's just, same story, different year. It's that type of thing. It's really frustrating, but at the same time, I think coming into this year, as frustrating as it is for anybody who has watched Georgia basketball throughout its history. For me, it was starting in the '90s, going to games in Stegman, growing up right outside of Athens, going to games, and in college and all that, and knowing that Georgia's best run outside of a Final Four run that predated my birth, that Georgia's best run was the Jim Herrick years where they were cheating. And Tubby Smith did great when he was at Georgia, except for the year that they were the 3 seed, his best team. They lost in the first round. There's just been no excitement. There's no history to really speak of with Georgia basketball. And I don't really understand why that is, because it's no, it's not. It's not football. The boosters, those who have the money, they care way more about football. They've never cared the same level or even remotely close to basketball. But what I can't figure out, you got a program like Ole Miss. Ole Miss hasn't been good at basketball, but they built probably the best arena in the SEC. You've got Alabama, never really cared about basketball, really didn't have a history, and here they are. One of the best teams. Yes, they obviously have the off-field troubles. Take that issue aside. Still have a really good team. They were good last year. They were good the year before that. They've built a program to compete. Auburn, they are competing. They've been to a Final Four recently. Why hasn't Georgia been able to do that? And here's the thing. I thought Tom Crean was going to do a good job, at least making Georgia relevant at basketball. And he turned out, he took a below mediocre team and imploded it. And so Mike White going 16-16 this year, I think, quite honestly, one, disappointing to see how this team finished down the stretch. They had some early wins this year that made you think, okay, maybe this team's better than we thought. They weren't. But still, 16-16 with this group compared to where they were a year ago, marked improvement. So you take that, but you look at how they finished, how just disengaged they seemed on the court, and it makes you wonder, what's this team going to look like next year? And of course, I think Anthony Dasher hit the nail on the head. This is going to be a team that has to rely heavily on the transfer portal for 2023-2024, and that's not a good place you want to be when you're trying to rebuild a program and establish a culture. And so that, to me, is where I think Georgia's going to run into some trouble when it comes to when it comes to building on this year. Now, the good thing with Mike White is, I think Mike White, the positive, he's going to ultimately over time win more than he loses. So that's great. Georgia hasn't had that in a long time. I think Mark Foxy finished with a winning record, but a lot of that was front loaded, very mediocre. As it continued under his tenure, and then of course Tom Crean, just not a culture fit whatsoever. Mike White's key is going to be, he's got to be able to recruit and retain, and I think for a lot of people, a lot of coaches these days, that's the hardest part of being a coach. You can transfer anywhere the next year. There's no penalty. NIL's involved. That makes it easier for kids to want to leave. So Mike White's got to figure out a way to recruit and retain. I think the X's and O's part, I think the coaching part, he's fine. And he's proven that at Florida. He's never had a losing record as a head coach. Unfortunately for Mike White, he now has his first 500 season as a head coach in college basketball, but still has not had a losing record. I think that shows that the guy's sound when it comes to the game of basketball. He's just got to figure out a way to like I said, recruit, retain, and move forward. But then long term, is Mike White the guy to be able to build a foundation at Georgia and turn Georgia into a team that can compete for SEC titles and compete for deep runs in the NCAA tournament. I mean, call me naive, but if you're a Georgia fan, you should not be just wanting to go to the tournament. I don't care if it's been, since 2015, if I'm not mistaken, the last time Georgia went to an NCAA tournament. And before that, it was Mark Fox's second year. I believe that would have been 2010. And then before that, you get what I'm saying. I don't care if that's kind of the measuring stick. I mean, it's Georgia for crying out loud. This team just won 2 national titles in back-to-back seasons in football. They should have the program. They should pour the resources. And I mean, for crying out loud, resources. I mean, Stegman Coliseum's falling apart at the moment. I mean, it's kind of a joke when you think about it from that perspective. So, I mean, Josh Brooks has to, in my opinion, I think he's got to step up the resource game when it comes to basketball. He's got to make sure Mike White has everything in his toolkit to build this program up. I look at what he did at Florida. He carried on from the Billy Donovan era, but he didn't really take that that giant leap to put Florida back into that Final Four conversation. Now, I say that. Look, Georgia fans, I think, would be fine if they build this program to a point where, hey, a Sweet 16 every 3-4 years, but most years are making the tournament. I think most Georgia fans would be fine with that. I don't think that's personally, I think you should shoot bigger. But I think that's what Mike White can give Georgia long term. He can give them that kind of stability. Will they compete for national championships? That I don't think so. And I hate saying that. I'm not trying to be negative. I'm not trying to be a Debbie Downer coming off of this first season under him. But I don't think that you're going to see it would have to be catching lightning in a bottle, essentially kind of like what Baylor did a few years ago. And I don't know if I see that long-term, like they're going to be a power for years to come. And I mentioned Baylor, but Baylor's a top 10 program. I don't know if I see that year in, year out under this coaching staff. And again, that's just kind of how I'm seeing it right now. Maybe things can change. Maybe Mike White is given everything he needs. They got to start with the freaking arena. I mean, let's call it what it is. They need to. I don't understand the logistics in terms of why they can't move forward and just build a new arena. Ole freaking Miss has probably the best arena in the SEC, and Georgia's still stuck in a coliseum that was built in the 70s and is dated and falling apart. So we'll close it on that note. Georgia basketball, maybe one day they'll be good. I sure hope so. I can remember times growing up when those years, the Jim Herrick years, for crying out loud, when they were they had a really good team and were very, very competitive in the conference. I can remember just how that Coliseum, how Stegman Coliseum was unbelievable. The atmosphere was incredible. Even early in the Mark Fox era, I can remember some of those games where they had a full house and everybody was into it. That can happen consistently at Georgia. It just seems that not enough people care, and maybe one day they will. So we'll see. But on that note, thank you so much for tuning in. If you haven't already, please go to the UGAsports.com dog vent and subscribe. It's the best community for UGA sports fans on the World Wide Web. Thanks so much for watching this morning. You guys have been awesome. I've been Jason Butt. Y'all take care.